Fine to speak into your mics, please. That's next. Yep. Great.
Amy Wolf is indicated she's not able to attend this evening, so she's absent. Don Mattice, Richard Dory,
Present.
Greg Stewart is absent. Aaron Chase,
Present.
Brent McCarthy,
Present.
Betty Harris Howard is not present. I'm just going to see if they'll participate.
So we have a quorum. And I appoint Brent.
We have a quorum, yes, and you are appointing Brent?
Yep,
Okay.
please.
Thank you.
First item, acceptance of minutes from September 24th. A motion? Make a motion? For a second? Second by Aaron. Discussion? Errors or omissions? All in favor? Vote, thank you. So tonight is the workshop. There's no applications. There will be some next time, do we know?
Evening, there's a public hearing for some zoning amendments, excuse me, that you previously discussed. And then under workshop topic, discussion around planning board, notices of decision, making findings, and then maybe some other procedural.
Okay, so let's go to A.
Would you like me to just give a recap of what these changes are? So the first one, the state mandates what the noticing requirements are when a town amends or establishes a land use ordinance. And ours was not in keeping with what the state requires. So the change merely matches the state, the minimum standard. So for instance, this evening's meeting, we noticed the items in the newspaper, which we don't normally do for other applications. But the state does mandate that. So it was in accordance with the 2 times in the paper, at least 12 days in advance and then 7 days in advance. So that is the procedure the state mandates, and we have followed it this evening.
So there's no action necessary on that one.
Ultimately, when we finish reviewing these, my suggestion is that you take an action to either forward the items to the council with a recommendation to approve them, table them, or if there's further information, well, I guess if you table them, if there's more further information, then we could identify that moving forward.
We'll go through all of them and then make that decision.
And we need to make sure, see if there's public input. I can see we have one person present, Joe Smith. So we'll see if he's here to speak to any of the items. So that is A, is the public hearing requirements for land use ordinances. So that would include your zoning ordinance, like you have the mineral extraction and tower. So it's all land use related ordinances, so that will apply. Excuse me. Then the second one is around public hearing requirements for conditional use permit applications. So this is specific to your local ordinance. It's not state mandated. I apologize, I'm froggy. So it was just clarification of language. And there was quite a bit of discussion around this before you moved it forward. And so it states that public hearing, it's just more clear that a public hearing is required for a conditional use permit request, specifies owners of abutting properties and properties within 500 feet get mailed a notice at least 10 days in advance of the hearing. And then there was a lot of discussion around the CEO or designee. I don't know if that jogs your memory at all. It's pretty straightforward, but there was quite a bit of discussion to determine that language. So this really isn't anything you're not already doing. It just clarifies, we already noticed for a public hearing. We notice abutters, just clarification.
So just as process, you covered A and B, right?
Correct.
And as we go, I think it'd be appropriate, if there's any input or comment, maybe we take them as we go. So on A, was there any input or issues or concerns or questions? Right?
Just a general question, Don. I continue to follow the Town of Winthrop email notifications, and I've checked off all the boxes for those, the ones that I want to see. I wasn't sure if we were actually having public hearing on these items tonight, or if it was a discussion that we were going to review these before they go to a public hearing. And so I'm always looking at that Town of Winthrop page, and I keep thinking to myself, well, I'm not seeing any notifications for public notice. It's obviously been done in the newspaper and what you need to do, but just a thought that it might be not a bad idea to have that information on the Town of Winthrop page. Hey, there's going to be a public hearing tonight on these specific items.
I hear you. So let me just see, I'm sorry, there's a. Chair.
It does say so on the agenda. Public hearing zoning amendment.
Yeah, so they was noticed as a public hearing, but you said it's not clear on the web page, not like a Facebook page.
Correct. I've not seen a single notification for public hearing since I've been on the planning board, other than what might be in our agenda.
On the e-alerts, so when we post agendas, a mass email goes out to everyone who's clicked the box. They should get a notice that the agenda is posted, and you're not receiving.
I do get those, yes, but I'm not getting a formal public notice that there's going to be a public hearing tonight.
Okay. We are not doing that separately, but I'm hearing this is.
And maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. I go there for information, and
So let me understand. The agenda's is posted for public notice, right?
Yes.
So within the agenda, we're talking about having a public hearing tonight on these items. And that's the assumption you're making, that reading of the agenda gets you that information, versus what Brent's saying is not a official public hearing on these items.
Yeah.
It's kind of two ways to look at it, I guess.
yes,
Separate from the application, public input.
That's what I'm hearing Brent say.
yes. I mean,
Yeah.
you're posting something in the newspaper, and I was just curious why that same notification doesn't show up on kind of the Winthrop page, or the notifications that come out from the Town of Winthrop.
Oversight. And I'll make a note and we'll address that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So technically tonight, we're having the public hearing on these items.
Correct. So we do need to act.
Okay.
We have two people here now, Stephen McDermott.
Andy?
So thank you for that observation.
So we're done with B? 5B, we're done with that? So we're caught up on A and B. Joe Smith, are you following us or hearing us?
And it looks like you're muted, Joe, if you're trying to speak. Thumbs up.
Was giving a thumbs up, okay.
Thank you.
So Joe, if you would jump in any appropriate time if you've got a question, okay? That another thumbs up? Okay, go ahead, Don. Welcome, Andy.
So that's A and B. C, I'm going to recommend I'm going to give you an explanation of what this is, hopefully a short explanation, and I'm going to request that this gets tabled. So when you passed LD, or when the council passed LD 2003, you went through the language, public hearings, put it together. And I think the intention versus what the language is indicating is a little unclear. So what I did, the State says any place you allow single-family dwellings, you have to allow accessory dwelling units. You can't apply parking standards and you can't apply density. So that we've done. Except that in the shoreline ordinance, the state says you do have to meet the requirements of shoreline zoning. So in that, the density requirements do apply. So a second unit in the shoreline does have to meet the minimum lot area standards. So if it's 80,000 square feet and you have an 80,000 square foot lot, you cannot have an additional dwelling unit. As it's defined in our ordinance, no parking and no density.
Okay, so I'm a little slow here. So I'm looking at table 1
Hmm?
under Article 3, which is this table over here, right?
Yep.
And where should I find that note to indicate that?
So what I had done was I added, there's a red underline 11G,
Yep, I see it. Yep,
accessory dwelling units, and specified that they're not permitted in that district.
that's how it's duly noted. Thank you very much for catching me up. Everybody on the same page?
So if I can just give a little background as to how this came about. There was someone who did not have the minimum land area to have a second unit in the shoreline zone. And she was arguing that we weren't clear on that in our ordinance. And we said, well, it's a state standard. And
Now it is. Oh, now it will be, right.
Yeah, so Mark had checked in with Colin Clark and he said, yeah, they have to have additional land area to have a second unit in the shoreline zone. And so in intending to be more clear, I've added this in and said it's not permitted, relying on our definition of accessory dwelling unit, which states that the density and parking don't apply. But actually, that's not going to fix it. Because the state also says that you can't preclude the ability to have an accessory dwelling unit in any district. So it's what Colin had actually said is they call it an additional dwelling unit. In the shoreline zone, an ADU is an additional dwelling unit. So it's the same as a two-family, or if you had an outbuilding. So I haven't talked to Mark as to what that looks like, but I do want to make sure it's clear, and maybe being silent is okay, but this person raised it. I do believe that something needs to change, and I don't have that language right now, so I think that we should table it, but I want to make sure, I know I'm throwing a lot out there, that you understand the concern that was raised and what I'm trying to do. Is that clear?
Yep.
Are you using additional dwelling unit and accessory dwelling unit as interchangeable? Because I think I've heard you say both, and I'm curious if there's a difference in definition.
So we have defined an accessory dwelling unit locally as a dwelling unit that doesn't have to adhere to density and parking. It is an additional dwelling unit on a property. So, but we don't have a definition of additional dwelling unit. Colin Clark threw that out there today, trying to help us sort out the difference between, say, a two-family and an accessory dwelling unit. They function as the same, but one has, in the shoreland, it has to meet minimum land area requirements. So
Understood.
the state says you can't preclude having an accessory dwelling unit. So we really can't say, oh, you can't have accessory dwelling units. It has to be worded differently. I just want to make it clear that in the shoreline district, you need to have twice the land area.
Gotcha. So maybe we can just footnote those no's to say it's not permitted, but the footnote says unless you've got additional 80,000 additional square feet.
One in a way or the other.
So just like your,
Andy, question?
Not be up to date on this, but it used to be that you could have, I think it was 25 or 50 feet. So if you had 200 feet, one dwelling unit, and you know another dwelling unit, you need another 50 feet. Okay, and then the other thing about the differentiation between a two-family unit and two dwelling units. You can have two families living in a property. As long as there's only one kitchen, okay, or one kitchen table, or, in other words, what is it? Living, sleeping, cooking, and eating, okay? So to be a dwelling unit, you have to have some place to cook, you have to have an area to live in, and it doesn't say they all have to be separate. And you have to have a bed, and you have to have a bathroom, you have to have a table. So if you have two families, as long as you only have one place you know, they only have one stove, you don't have two dwelling units. I'm not sure. I don't see the enforcement of saying you can't have two families live in one. What, you know, a two-family unit, if it's only one dwelling unit.
Oh, yeah.
Just throwing it out there, not telling you what to do.
We're talking about two full units.
Two families.
Yeah, that's two families and there's nothing to preclude that, but if you have two kitchens and bathrooms and sleeping
Three dwelling.
entities, then you have two. So we're not saying with any of this discussion that you can't have two families that live in a dwelling unit. Is that what you were thinking we were?
Yeah.
Yep.
I was trying to see if you.
Okay, any other questions on that? So we're moving on to D.
So the state has indicated, and we've had this discussion again previously, but mobile homes are not looked at differently than manufactured homes, stick-built homes. It's a single-family dwelling.
That's state law, right?
Pardon me?
That's state law, right?
It is.
I mean, fairly new state law.
So we call it out in our use table. So my recommendation is that it is defined, but it doesn't need to be identified as a separate use because essentially it is a
So
single.
on the table, we've taken it right out. Okay. Questions?
In our zoning ordinances, don't we have mobile home parks restricted to certain areas?
We do. Mobile home parks are different than mobile homes.
Okay,
So a mobile home park would be one.
almost a
kind of
subdivision.
land. Technically, yes.
Yep, thank you.
Basically, what it's saying, is you can't, what, discriminate, is that the right word? Or you can't rule out a mobile home being where a regular home would be, whether manufactured or stick built or whatever. They're all the same.
Previously, they weren't allowed in the village.
Yeah, they weren't allowed in the village. And mobile home parks are allowed. That's a good thing to discuss.
Again, that's clearly a mobile home, been eliminated as,
Single-family home.
Buy a lot, put a mobile home on it anywhere,
Mhm.
including the shoreland zone.
Including the village.
If you buy a lot on the lake.
and technically, tell me if I'm wrong, but in the industry, mobile versus manufactured, basic difference is the floor structure and how it's placed, slab versus a foundation, frost wall. There's some subtleties in the business, just from a structural standpoint, but from a land use standpoint or our business, there is no mobile home.
Dwelling unit or it's not.
Now, a question is, do we have any kind of rules about, in our ordinance, do we have any rules about placement of a mobile home? Has to be on a slab? I believe that's the case.
There are some standards, I don't recall.
So is that a conflict? I don't know.
Hmm.
Pardon? Well, I think it's part of our ordinance. I just want to make sure we don't have double speak.
Just double check something here.
I mean, the footprint of the home is a big area. The slabs that you have to put under it is generally not much bigger.
Well, I'm thinking back, Andy, when you bought a mobile home, you put it on blocks on ground. And
Wheels on it.
in most towns change their ordinance to require a slab. And I don't think you'd find any new installation that would be on bare ground. It'd have to be on a slab. And I just wonder if there's any conflict with us eliminating mobile homes in our table 2 for land use. And what words say relative to what's required to be under a mobile home in our ordinance? That's the only question I have.
I don't believe that to be the case.
Okay.
I will note, and I had talked about this before, I didn't note it again in advance of the meeting, but the statute does allow the town to have some design standards. If you wanted to have, skirting or a peaked roof or, some design element, you can require that. We don't currently.
Well, let's leave it this way. If you just do a cursory look to make sure there's no conflict, I'm happy,
Okay.
Thank you. So we're on to, any questions on the table two item, that item D? E?
So this was something that was raised as a result of the state looking at the ordinance amendments you all made in conjunction with the zoning map changes, making the digital map. And they noted that, and this has been in there for a while, but it just got picked up. The table of uses, table 3, which is the table of uses, I'm sorry, table 3, which is the bulk and space requirements. The resource protection district is not noted as 250 feet, and which is the requirement by the state. It currently states 100. The shoreline setback is 100 in the resource protection district. The state requirement is 250. And actually in the ordinance later on in the development in the shoreline district, it does again state 250. So they're at odds. So we just need to change the table to match the state requirements. So they approved the changes to the ordinance contingent upon this being changed.
So if you look at the table 3, the very first line, zoning district shoreline, you changed 100 to 250. And that, there was some verbiage later on that said that anyways, right?
It does. So it still was being applied.
And that's
There's just
250, right?
Consistency.
So we had a conflict between our table and some of our verbiage. This fixes that.
It
And that's
does.
one Colin brought to our attention early on when we had the council approve. And
Or shoreline.
this definition for shoreline,
Did I hear that right? I do
No,
have
she
things
says-
wrong every once in a while. In the resource protection district, the shoreline zone is 100 feet from the lake. Make no sense. I reduce it.
I thought you used the word setback. We're not talking setback, we're talking shoreline.
It is the setback.
Setback.
It's the structural setback. In the resource protection, which is the most restrictive zone that you have, the setback from the resource is 250 feet. There is a special exception provision for a single-family home under certain criteria that the planning board can consider, but generally speaking, if you have a lot and you can build outside the 250.
I'm sorry, I didn't read it thoroughly. I see it as
State-
setback.
Oh, okay.
The state says,
The state says 250. And we say 250 in the text of our ordinance, but our table says 100. So we've been applying 250
yeah.
even, yes, so it needs to be changed.
so this table change fixes that
Yes.
issue that Colin had, even though we had the verbiage and the rest of it, there was 250. Okay,
Change the resource protection. What about the shoreline?
Shoreline is 100, still 100.
So help me understand, other members of the planning board. We have a 100-foot setback to a public water supply, which in my mind is pretty important. I'm trying to think of resources that we are trying to protect that are more important than our drinking water supply. Why do you have to be 250 feet back from resource protection, what could be wetland, wading birds, waterfowl habitat, whatever it's going to be? But why is that more important than our public water supply? And we don't have to answer it. I just,
Well, I'm curious
doesn't-
what the
on
state
straight face,
says
it doesn't make sense to me.
and I'm curious what the state says about that.
Well, the public water district is a local
It
district.
is,
but
it's not a state, okay.
Yeah, so that was created by the town. So if that's something that you think should be reviewed, and there may be some element in the comprehensive plan that actually identified that, just didn't get prioritized in our list. But that's local, and the state mandate is 250 for the resource protection.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's been like that forever, right?
Well, for 2 years at least.
I mean, nothing we changed recently, so it's been 100 feet right along, so. But it's a valid point you make.
Yeah. I'm going to look into it on my own.
Shoreline zone is still 250 feet within the public waters.
It's 100 feet within the shoreline zone. The shoreline zone itself is 250 from the water, but
Even inside the public water supply,
Correct,
250.
I'm
100.
No, that-
Structural setback in the public water
Structural
district.
setback in public water supply is 100 feet because shoreline zone in the public water supply is 250, just like everywhere else.
You might be confusing the setback with the
Right.
zone. So the zone includes 250, but the setback, yes.
if you got a wetland on your property, it's 250 feet. Just doesn't make sense.
I'm curious what the map says about the water supply, which would be the Upper Narrows, right?
Yeah.
I wonder what does the map say?
And Carlton Pond and Carlton Pond Stream are all public water supply too.
You know what?
What was the other one?
Carlton Pond and Carlton Pond Stream, which flow into flow into Upper Narrow, are all considered public water supply district as well.
So you named two? Did I miss one?
Carlton Pond Stream, and then Upper Narrows Pond. Yeah.
Did say three.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman? I'm sorry.
Madam?
I just want, so it's not a long agenda tonight, and you all have been reviewing the amended digital map. This is, would it be inappropriate for me to get that map for you all to look at?
Let's take that item as a future meeting item. We need to have a discussion on it.
Because they were separating, they
Thank
have
you.
two maps now, shoreline, and so one's actually an overlay. It makes more sense, I believe, so that maybe help that discussion.
I mean, there's a lot of properties at that 100 foot or less, but going forward, what should it be? So let's have that discussion, another meeting. Is that agreeable?
Agreeable.
And I will say that Public Water District 2, we talked about having some standards in there, be clear on if there are additional standards. And one of the comprehensive plan goals was to look at the percentage of impervious area in town in regards to water quality. So that might be a discussion that can loop multiple.
Well, I think if we have that discussion on the 100 versus the 250 for water supply, and that's what you're saying, is what are that criteria within those, whatever the distance is, what are those criteria that are very important to us? Like septic systems, list goes on, buildings, whatever. Okay, so relative to 5, we finished all 5, A through E. That completes the public hearing side of it.
I would just make sure Joe,
You have any input on those items? Do you hear me, Joe?
he could have stepped out of the room for all we know, really, right?
Stimulating conversation, so
Could leave us. for a
riveting, I should say.
Okay, so we've completed the public hearing side of those 5. Is there any action, what action does the board need to take?
So my recommendation is based on your discussion previously, your review of the text, public input, is to recommend that town council adopt A, B, D, and E, and for us to forward that to the council. I'll put a memo together indicating whatever the vote is, and suggesting that be adopted, in that C be tabled so I can add a note or whatever that looks like for clarification and bring that back to you at the next meeting. Or if you want to wait for 2 weeks and table.
Let me understand what you just said. Which one would you saying to hold?
To hold on to the accessory dwelling unit item, because I need to give you some actual draft language, whether it's just a footnote, whatever that looks like, to be more clear. Unless
So
you,
that's another public hearing.
well, this is the public hearing.
I
You
understand.
would table it, and if people are continuing.
But again, whatever you come up with for a change, if appropriate, then that would be subject to a public hearing.
Yes, you'd continue
That's
to
what I
take
thought.
public input, unless if you have something right now, but I don't feel the need to rush it.
So what is the question on that one, I guess? On C.
On C, the action would be, my recommended action is to table that or continue it until the August 22nd meeting to make a decision as to whether to recommend it to the council.
I guess what I'm perplexed about is that you're going to research this to see if there's some other change or?
So in order for so the way I put it in the table does not achieve my goal.
Okay, so there is additional. All
Yeah.
right. So,
Bren had suggested a footnote, which other people seem to think, I think that probably would be
Yeah.
a good way to do it.
but I guess the question is, looking at A through C, does the board want to go ahead and approve going forward with presentation to council, A, B, D, and C? Or they want to wait until we get further information on C and do them as a package? That correct? Brent?
I would recommend that we move forward presenting to the town council on items A, B, and D, and table both C and E.
Because of the
And,
resource
and my
protection.
rationale there is if you've got to go before the council to advocate for these and why we're making those changes, if we don't understand what E is all about at this point with the 250 feet in the, I mean, I know that's a state requirement, but I'd like to think we have a,
And the other option is to table all of it until we get the information on those two.
and have a complete package.
That's what I'd do.
Yeah. Yeah, I would too. So that,
My suggestion would be to continue the public hearings on the zoning amendments to the August 22nd meeting. I will provide a couple of revisions and explanations.
and then we can finalize them.
August, I wrote down August, I'm sorry.
That's what confused us.
October, I
Move right
apologize.
along. Brent,
10,
I
not,
hear a motion coming.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that relative to the public hearing zoning amendments, that we continue those until the next meeting on August 27th.
That's A through E.
A through E, correct?
I hear a second?
I'll second.
I got 2 seconds. In discussion? All in favor? Continue to the October 22nd meeting.
and just for clarification, on C, I'm going to provide a footnote. Most likely that'll be the most clear thing to do, is to say that in the shoreline district, accessory dwelling units or additional units is what the state was kind of helping us, provide that phrase, does need to meet the minimum land area. That's what we're clarifying. It's not that you can't have a second unit or an accessory dwelling unit, you just need to meet the minimum land area requirement. And then on,
No, in the
No.
charter. or you-
no, I'm going to take that out.
But you'd say yes, wouldn't you? Yes, it is permitted, footnoted to, however, you have to have additional land area to support that.
Okay. All right, so that
makes
would be
sense.
what I bring back.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. And then we want just some more information about
E,
the 250-foot.
why it's 100 instead of 250? And I'm gonna guess you're gonna have to research if the state has anything to say about it. Colin didn't catch it, so I would guess not, but just what facts we have around it, maybe some history, I don't know. Somebody ought to know, maybe Bill Monaco, somebody ought to know why it's 100, not 250. Okay. We're gonna leave that in your hands to figure
Okay.
out and present.
Get some clarification and,
All right, moving on to workshop number 6. I
so
guess let's paraphrase this or bracket it. So, A, written record requirements. Where do we find that? You got it there?
So the written, I'm just going to read it to you, and I'm going to pass out, there's 2 things here. One is some sample motions. The other one is a finding of fact, a sample finding of fact. So the state requires, yep, I do. So the state requires that when an entity makes a decision, this is the state statute I'm looking at, that you have to make a written record of every decision involving the conditional approval or denial of an application, license, certificate, other type of permit. So this applies not just to the planning board. You have to set forth in the record the reason or reasons for your decision-making and make finding of the fact in writing sufficient to appraise the applicant and any interested members of the public on the basis of the decision.
Which one you looking at?
I apologize. I'm just reading what the state statute says. Yeah, so you have to, so when you make
We
a
have to look at you,
decision,
not look at the paper then. We have to look at you explaining versus the paper. We don't have a paper to look at.
no, we've talked about this before, but I'm just, because I've just said it
We're
before.
listening now.
This is where the state says it. So the state says, if you make a decision, the planning board makes a decision, you have to make a decision that the applicant has provided the information you need to determine if the project meets each of the required standards. So in order to do that, remember one time we went through and we voted on every single one? And then the board said, well, we'll just reference the findings, which is very commonly done. So when you've done this all along without actually spelling it out. So you always review an application and you say, okay, this meets the requirements or it doesn't. Oh, okay, so you don't meet the 20% coverage or it exceeds 1 foot by the height. But you haven't gone through like a checklist and said, these are all of them that apply and here's how they meet it or don't meet it, which is what is mandated. So if there's an appeal, when it goes to the court or the zoning board, they can make a determination that the board made you draw a reasonable conclusion from the facts that were presented.
So that was that checklist that we worked on relative to applications.
That was submittal requirements.
Okay.
So you have in front of you the one that says revised 42325 at the top. And so what this is that what I've been working towards is getting the applicant to fill this in. Like they request, a hearing before the planning board, and this is actually the application. This is use the checklist to determine how to submit the information, how many copies, the format. But this is the information. So in an instance of a shoreline permit, they have to make a statement to each of these. And I think it was Aaron who had said previously when we discussed this, that we could put more information around what so the statement, it says A, principal building, but it doesn't say what the standard is. And I think there was a recommendation from the board that we do put more information on there, and I'm gonna pass around an example. I think this is Reed Field. So criteria review for approval of site plans and subdivisions. And so not only did they just state the standard like I've done in black here, they put a statement about what the criteria is. So I'm just gonna pass that. It will make it longer, but it will make it more thorough and you will definitely know if the project meets the standard. And it makes it easy for the applicant if it's in there. I'm fine either way with that. So a finding, because Don was thrown a little bit at the last meeting.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you have a draft finding that ideally the applicant is actually going to put together because they're going to fill in this form that says click to enter information here. They're going to fill all that in and say how they meet the requirement, which I'll expand on what the requirement is. And then you'll have all the facts, like here's the requirements and here's how they say they meet it. And then you have to go through it and determine whether it's accurate. This isn't accurate or this needs to be changed. This isn't factual. I need more information here. That's your basis for having a discussion around the application as to whether or not it can be approved.
So it's very possible some of these or several of these could be not applicable.
Correct.
And that's what you put in, not applicable. So this is overall checklist for whatever comes down the pike for use, whether it's commercial or residential or.
In this particular instance, this is what would be used for a non-conforming building in the shore. So you received shoreland permits for non-conforming structures. So in this instance, it calls out specifically Article 2, which is non-conforming buildings. General performance standards apply for everything and development in the shore area. So they have to speak to, because you have to determine if it meets those requirements regardless. So what this does is it spells it out in a format that you can adopt after you have your discussion, public input, questions to the applicant. Use this as a basis that they are the facts as amended or not, as presented. And if you're stating, yep, they meet all these requirements, then you would approve it with or without conditions once you've reviewed it and either amended or adopted it as presented.
We're not currently using this, right?
Well,
You are.
I'm intermittently, we presented them and that's.
You're using bits and pieces as you explained before. Now you're
Yeah.
trying to bring it together congruently so that it's a total package.
And it will be easier for you all because it will be consistent. Like the format will be the same. Every time something comes in, you're going to know right to where to look.
How is that going to tie in when you make a motion to approve?
So here is Some sample motions was the other document that I handed out.
It's this other document?
And if you look at 6 at the bottom. So, and this is just a few words. This is not carved in stone. This is just a simple suggestion as to how it could be done. Is for someone to make a motion to adopt the findings and conclusions, which is that document as written. If everything is perfect, makes perfect sense, nothing to change, you adopt it as written.
Findings of fact you're talking.
Yep, and there'll be recommended conditions because we have some standard conditions. So there'll always be some recommended conditions. Maybe you add conditions, change conditions, like it's a template for you to use.
As a chair trying to run a meeting, I
Yeah.
dreamt about this last night. On
Funny.
looking, too many times, you've already voted on the application complete, and I'm not on the same page, or you've already approved it, whatever it may be. So I was looking for a checklist that I could use to get down through and be on the same page. Here it is. Thank you.
What I like to do, Rick, and it hasn't been embraced yet, but is to have the information about the application. Here's the property information, this is where we do, this is the existing use, this is what they want to do, here's the permit history, here's activity that's occurred. And then, some more facts, like we took the application on this date, they paid their fee. It's that we sent the abutter notices in accordance with the requirements. At some point in there, I like to put actually a sample motion that says, here's some suggested language, whether to accept it as complete or incomplete. Like within the document. So for each application, you should use the draft findings and go down and see if everything's there and see if the suggested motions are applicable.
So under decision 6, the first one is the one we traditionally done,
Mm-hmm,
the application is complete,
mm-hmm.
correct?
Well, under 6,
Next one down, probably, I make a motion to adopt the finding and conclusion as amended.
so you have not done this.
Okay, so we've
Once or
got a
twice.
different method we're using currently that kind of looks like this.
So you're accepting it as complete, starting your review, doing all of the pieces, taking public input, asking questions, deliberating. But then when it comes time to approve it, you've all determined that it meets the requirements of the ordinance, and then you approve it. Now, if that was taken to court, how does the court know how you made your decision? Because you haven't gone through the criteria, each criterion said yes or no, that it meets each criteria. It is cumbersome, but it is the way that most
You're looking at
communities do
6
it.
decisions. I'm going on down through, and the bottom one says I move to table, continue the application.
Mhm.
I don't see one here that says I approve the application.
So the first one is, so the approval is adopting the findings of facts. So the findings of facts
Yep.
are going to be, here's some facts about the property, here's the criteria, and here's how they're met or not met. And then the conclusion is, that the project can be approved under these
This
conditions.
is what you were trying to get Don to do at the last meeting before he made the motion to approve it.
To adopt the findings. Yeah,
You want that in the motion to approve?
to adopt the findings. And I'll put it right in the findings. I'll put a motion. So basically, the only difference is you're approving the application, but you're calling out all the facts as how they're met. Let me give you an example of how this is helpful. We had a shoreline violation on a property recently, and when we went back through the file, we couldn't determine what the board had approved. Right? There was no thing that said, it meets this standard, here's what that's there, and here's what they're adding, and the total is this, and it meets the standard. None of that was there, so we literally didn't know it was approved. But that will not happen with this process.
And Dawn, so during our last meeting with the Grucies, Dawn was suggesting we approve the findings of fact, and I think both you and Jamie had an issue with the fact that it was referencing a cesspool. And the cesspool is, it was in their application, that is a finding of fact. There is a cesspool on the project, on the property that doesn't necessarily play into our decision, but for the 10, 11 years I was at Maine DEP, anytime I would review an application, just like we do here, and I issued an order either approving or denying that application after we determined it was complete, very similar process we go through here, I would have to write 2 pages of findings of fact. And it's that same exact reference that Don said. If you're making a decision in the state of Maine, you will have findings of fact that will help somebody else determine how you made your decisions and ultimately how we've approved an application to show that it complies with the criteria that we have to review applications under.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So what if? what
Well-
we finding the- They lead to approval or denial
The conclusion will be different. So the facts,
lumped into one motion here, right? So wouldn't it be two separate motions? Say, okay, here are the facts,
I have two denial examples here. So I'll pass those around, but so this one here,
Well,
this is Reedfield, actually.
don't meet the finding of,
So the facts are the facts. Well, so if the fact is X and it doesn't meet the ordinance, you're going to find based on the facts that it doesn't meet that section of the ordinance. And in which case, in your conclusion, the action will be to deny it because your facts show that it doesn't meet the ordinance. So I'll pass these around. So you can just kind of see, this one is minutes. And these are just from the planning board manual that the Maine Municipal Association has. And this was done historically in Winthrop. If you go back in older planning board and zoning board, you all did it on the zoning board, didn't you, Aunt? So it used to be a regular practice at the planning board, and somewhere along the line, it fell by the wayside. So it's not unusual, it's not new, it's just being reintroduced. And here's another
So,
example. So these are
Dawn,
denials.
I think, if I remember correctly, 'cause I was feeling the same way at the moment, like last week when you asked Don to make a motion to approve the findings of, some of the findings of fact felt like, dude, how can we make a statement that they're facts when we don't know that they're facts?
Well, so
That's not what he was getting at. That's kind of what I was thinking.
so you do have to look at it
Make
and
a list.
decide.
All these facts are facts. We necessarily review all these items. We don't send information
so
to.
you're saying we should.
Well, there'll be a statement in there saying either not applicable, so there's nothing to review, or whatever the statement is, you may not have reviewed them individually at the meeting, which is recommended, which we did that one time. We went through every single one. But then we decided to just call out the ones that, okay, does everyone agree that these are factual, and are there any concerns? And we'll pull those out separate. So you have this tool that's created between myself and the applicant, and you may say, these facts are wrong, or we have no information, we can't make this determination. That's your job. And this is really, it's an outline for you to use to make a sound legal decision.
Well, let me use, if I can, let me use an example to bring closure. The one we heard on the 24th, with the Gruzy property, which for the record, I excused myself from. The permit for, to your point, the cesspool removal, the septic tank installation, the septic system installation, the tree cutting, those were all approved by Mark before the board saw it, which we believed he had the right to do. That's in his auspices. The board was hearing moving the non-compliant deck back to its original footprint pre-2011, pre-1989, and the addition of another deck to it and I believe the bathroom. Correct me if I'm wrong, but very least, to bringing the footprint back to where it should be and adding the deck on. Once you did that, the bathroom, I think, is neither here nor there. Mark could approve the bathroom being on the footprint of the deck that you approved, whichever. So we had three or four pieces that were going on. The board was reviewing the 25-foot setback, its compliance, and the current deck, or the existing deck being in compliance, and the addition of the deck beyond the 25 feet. So it got complicated in terms of the pieces. And some have been approved and we're in a process, in progress. So I'm not sure how all that example fits into this, but all said and done, to your point, the only place to go find what the board did, two places. You go to the minutes, where it says the motion was made, deem the application substantially complete. The board approved the application as presented. And that application, all said and done, that they saw was putting the deck back to its old footprint and adding a deck onto it. And all the other information that came in from that application was, all the details was part of that review. And being compliant with the 25-foot setback. The only place to go find that is the information in the packet for the application, which stated what I just said, and this. And what you're trying to do is take it to a different level where you have a legal document, which is this one, which is a statement of facts, right? And what we're trying to do is get it on the record, the approval of the application complete, what are the right words you want to use, and that the application was approved or tabled or put off to another meeting as tabled. And that would become the minute record still.
Was my point. If you've got these findings of fact and they don't meet, we wouldn't accept.
Well, if it's complete, you could accept it. The information could be wrong, but the conclusion that you'll draw when you make a decision, it could be denial, or it could be that it doesn't meet the requirements. So that fact is for you all when you deliberate, that the findings, you should review it before the meeting. And you use that to see if the project does meet the requirements. They're telling you instead of you having to sift through and be like, okay, so what's the height requirement and what, it's all in one place. Although you still have your ordinance and it's not a checklist, right? Like we have a planning board for a reason.
That's right, because they're going to fill out the findings of fact.
So if you look at the minutes,
Okay.
and there's two motions, the one, application substantially complete. That's what this is. Correct? So it wouldn't be, you'd be accepting the facts.
You'd just be accepting that there's enough information there that you're going to have a discussion with the applicant and start with an official review.
You wouldn't be.
Doesn't mean it's correct. It just means like if
Oh.
it says you need to provide a site plan in a north arrow, okay, there's a site plan in a north arrow. It could be completely bogus information, but hopefully that's not going to be the case. We'll stop that before it gets to the board, but
There's still two votes after that, so you approve this, and then the application complete, that's a second motion and vote,
what was the first one? I'm sorry.
accepting this, the facts of the application.
So you accept it as complete, and then you go through your whole process, use that document in your deliberations, because someone may say, hey, I don't see the flood elevation on here. Well, it's also in your findings, here's the criteria where it states you need to have it, and the response is inadequate. So we find that is not met.
So I'm curious, your work you did around that particular application, what you brought forward to the board, would that have satisfied this?
Yeah, the findings all indicated that it did meet the
So it was,
ordinance.
and so the motion would be to accept those facts?
The suggested motion was to adopt the findings as you've amended
As they are,
them,
right or wrong,
They
as they
are.
are.
if that's accurate, or after you've had all your deliberations, you could, that could be marked all up and, the applicant needs to come back because there's so much information. Like if it's that different, probably it's going to be something that's going to be continued or tabled. But as amended, you may add conditions. There may be conditions that staff suggested that you don't agree with, that you strike. So all that will be in one fell swoop, the findings and the decision. So your decision is based on what you find. So here's the facts and the criteria, and we're going to conclude that it does meet the ordinance, and here's our decision. And so that's what the findings will say. And if you adopt the findings, you're essentially saying the criteria are met, we can approve this with these conditions. You don't have to have conditions.
Now, is this a written input? Does it also include the lack of a better word, the testimony by the applicant? That's part of it also?
Correct, the official record. So you're making a statement that it meets the requirements of the ordinance and you're referencing the official record. So the facts are coming from the official record, which includes public testimony, minutes, deliberations.
If I could jump in. So the draft findings of fact that you provide to us before a meeting is your review of the application and you taking a first shot at what the findings of facts are and what the conditions should be. It's our responsibility to review that before the meeting, gather public comment, have discussions amongst ourselves, and ultimately on the document that's 42325, every one of us has to go through those 14 criteria and make a decision that, yes, this project as proposed will not cause water pollution or sedimentation. The finding of fact will justify that. We'll make the statement that this isn't going to cause water pollution because the applicant has a plan to provide erosion and sedimentation control. So that's where your finding of fact is going to be to justify us to either approve or deny an application, but it's the finding of fact that supports those 14 criteria that we have to review for each project.
When we get to the meeting, it sounds like we have the fact-finding report, lack of a better way to state it. You got the input from the presentation. You got
Will.
public input as well,
Yeah,
and our questions. You got feedback from the board if indeed there's something was missed or you want further information or you want something adjusted or whatever. That's part of it. And then there's a motion and a vote accepting that.
I think I'm following you, but you'll have this in your hand for the meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Yes. So as you work with that, you get all that other information.
All the other pieces come into that process, and then you make a decision to accept the, I keep using the word application complete, but that's what we're currently doing, but
Want to adopt the findings. So there's going to be findings there and you can adopt them because ideally it's the facts, right? And the conclusion should be that their requirements of the ordinance are met. If not, that'll be called out. So as you go through the process, you could, again, working with the document is important because you are making a statement that the facts are correct. I've just given you that jumping off point. You have to decide if it's accurate.
so all this is separate from the approval process.
No, this is a tool that, so you already do this without consciously saying like, so Greg always notices the flood elevation. And, Dawn oftentimes notices the height, but there's no thing that everyone goes through and makes sure, well, what about this and what about that? It's like certain people notice certain things.
That's in addition to, could be in addition to.
So they,
Hopefully we caught it with this checklist, but
yes,
If we agree, we approve the finding of facts. There may be other stuff that goes in. That doesn't mean we've approved the case.
if you adopt the findings of fact, I'm sorry, Brian, you want to?
No, I'm mumbling, sorry.
So you get the materials. First question is, hey, do you guys have, I'm just trying to make this as informal as like how realistically you're thinking, do we have enough information to make a legitimate decision? Okay, we do, we'll start. Then you're going to go through the process of hearing the presentation, asking questions, public input. And in the course of that, they're going to have to demonstrate the burden of proof is on the applicant to show that they meet the criteria that are going to be identified in your draft finding. You already do that because when the application comes in, you're looking at it against the ordinance to see if it meets those, the height or the floodplain elevation. It's just not spelled out in the way that the finding is. I mean,
I guess I don't understand. If you look down through the findings of fact
mhm.
and have a positive result, why do we need more paperwork? Isn't it just complicating the situation?
It's required by law. And you used to do it in your zoning.
well, I mean, it's a legal issue is what it is. It's protecting the town is what it is.
Well, and
Well,
it is protecting.
And the
the-
applicant for that matter too, but
But how do you know when you make that, when you all approve an application, that every piece has been looked at? Like, do you have a little checklist in your head? I'm not asking anyone to literally say this, but if I was on the planning board and you go through the requirements, because that's your job, and make sure it meets them all, do you just say it meets it and move on? Or like, there's no, it is a way for you to do that that's consistent with however you're doing it individually now, in your head or a checklist or,
Well, I'll offer a viewpoint from the other side, and that's an applicant. And I've done it twice for myself.
Mm.
West side and the east side of Lake Maranacook. And you work very hard at getting all the information together, doing the right thing. And then on top of that, doing the construction part of it the right way, so you don't violate any of the rules. And then you're still left with my last one. I went to the board, the planning board, I went to Board of Appeals, and was told by the state that they couldn't approve it. And the state had to approve it. Colin approved it. So there's three parties I had to be involved with on Memorial Drive to be able to go build what I was proposing. And there were changes in the process, and a lot of things that you had described occurred. All said and done, Colin recommended I go put that at the Registry of Deeds to document what was approved and what was built,
Always.
always. And I don't think people do it, to tell you the truth. I did it. COVID got in the way, but I did it. So
Can
my
I
point of
comment
all
on
that
this
is,
one?
I'm still, as a landowner, as a person who did one of these projects approved by three parties, I still don't know, all said and done, when the other foot drops and somebody's coming back to, you're in violation here. You know, and I don't live in fear. I mean, I'm just saying it's a concern of on the other side of the people, the applicant, that, and this document helps some, I think. To me, right now, this project we approved, the minutes are all you got for documentation that was approved. Other than the application file that you have,
correct.
putting the two together.
Funding wasn't adopted. So it's the actual application with no conclusion, no
Correct.
obvious conclusion, except for the board said, yep,
So the other foot hasn't dropped.
yeah, okay, that, I see what you're saying.
Can I,
Apologize.
I'm talking about that.
Yeah,
can I comment?
I didn't mean to diminish you, Andy, before, but
Look at me,
Hey,
Andy.
just,
because
you know, I mean, I'll
you
never
used to
get.
make findings, and so that's why I'm surprised that you didn't, yeah.
First thing is, can I ask you if that non-compliant deck was a setback issue or an impervious area issue?
It was a 25-foot setback. Let me think about your question. It was built bigger than what the original footprint was, and the issue was 25-foot setback. And the deck is being brought back to its original footprint, which is the non-conforming pre-1989 area.
So if it was a setback issue, it should have went to zoning board.
Excuse me?
The deck itself was extended too far towards the property line of the lake or whatever. That, even so, it should, the zoning board deals with setbacks, so you could have got yourself out of some work there and sent that piece to the zoning
But
board.
then you got to prove hardship. And that's, yep.
Yeah,
We're
so,
looking for reduction in the setback though, correct?
No,
They were trying to meet the 25-foot setback, allowing for the footprint that existed before 1989. I
Right.
don't know how to say it, but
Yeah,
No,
no,
what you're
no,
asking.
no, I understand. I
I mean,
think
the zoning board has made people take off decks and things like that, okay? They're very lenient, but that doesn't mean when something is really egregious that they'll go along. Okay?
was volunteering
Applicant-
to go back to
the
the
applicant
it's
didn't make
still-
it right.
criteria.
They're not really covered because they didn't go to the zoning board, okay? Unless they took it off,
They took it off.
you know, so, yep.
The mile meets for the original footprint.
All right, so then I'm looking at this, this Reed Field example, And since they're in Reedfield and not in Winthrop, I can be more critical. The thing that concerns me here is like, in the second paragraph, okay, land use ordinance, Article 7, Section 5 was identified by the board as a warehousing and storage based, as warehousing storage based upon the description of the proposed use, et cetera. The next piece in that same paragraph says the district, the board also said that it was a non-conforming use. And then to go further to the end, it was described as a retail business, lumber and building materials. All those decisions are decisions that should have been made by the code enforcement officer before it ever came to you. Okay, those aren't zoning board decisions. If a code enforcement officer says this is a permitted use in this zone, okay, there's no more debate. Okay, that it's permitted. It's just a matter of you get to, but it has to go to the planning board. That means you get to apply conditions that make it more acceptable. You don't get to revisit the code enforcement officer's decision. Okay.
Well, the subtlety though, Andy, I think, is that if there's a case that Mark looks at and says, this really needs to go to the planning board, he turns it over to Dawn. Dawn starts to work with the applicant and fill in those blanks. And then from there, she presents it to the board. Am I right in that? That's how it occurs.
That usually is determined.
Right, that's what I'm saying. The code enforcement makes those,
Example.
no, the code enforcement officer has to make those decisions. Is it non-conforming? Is it conforming in the district? What district is it in?
And he does that based on the table
Yeah, but it's
and then turns it over to Dawn.
looking at the Reedfield thing, it doesn't look quite like that got done.
Okay, all right, I see what you're saying.
Just advising that you be using this.
Okay.
There's no 100%, this is the way to do it. I like to go through and list all the criteria in the ordinance because you can't miss anything. Some just make summary statements of the facts, but for me, I feel like something could fall through the cracks. So that whole discussion was kind of a narrative. It wasn't necessarily under a certain criteria. So I don't think we'll go there if you all end up being comfortable with the format that I'm proposing. And I knew that they did findings of fact at the state, Brent, but I didn't think about the fact that you had to write those up. Do you have suggestions around this, or maybe offer some more clarity as to what the use and intent is? Am I coming across clear as to how the benefit?
I mean, I think you are, Don, but I did this for work for a bunch of years. And from a regulatory standpoint, really, this is what you're suggesting protects us, protects the town, and protects the applicant. You know, that, you know, when the other foot falls.
I'll ask a loaded question. So why did the state do that? Why did the state require you to do that?
When I was at DEP, so that there would be a record of how the decision was made.
Illegal. It was a legal
It's all
situation.
very
When the
much
town's in the same position if we don't do something.
Absolutely, yeah. But again, it's not just for us, it's for the applicants as well, so.
The other thing is listening to your story about your own property. If nothing has changed since I left the zoning board, which admittedly was a while ago, and I'm 10 years older and my memory is 10 years older, but the zoning board had to notify the DEP of a pending case, okay? If it was in the shoreline zone, okay? And the DEP had 10 days to respond and advise the zoning board. The advisory wasn't binding, okay? It was just advisory, okay? If they didn't respond, then there was no advisory, no reason to even think about it, okay? And then the zoning board would make a decision, and that decision, basically irreversible. I mean, the DEP always commented to us that we were far too lenient, okay? And the board at the time's feeling was that that was part of our job, was to find that middle road, you know, that kept, you know, gave the citizens some opportunities without coming down on them with a hammer and saying, bang, you can't do this. It was always painful, especially in after the fact appeals, when we had to say, oh, you got to take that off or, I remember one case over by, remember where the old Seaway Boats was? And the family lived alongside Seaway Boats, put a great big deck out too close to the property line. I mean, we just couldn't find any way to bend the rules or, just.
That's why we're here, right?
In a different light.
That's why we're here, right?
Hmm?
We're here. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
And the zoning board of appeals as well. That's why.
Yeah. So we couldn't, always saw the zoning board, and although I never served on the planning board, saw the planning board in the same light. You have the citizen of the town or a business, whether they're citizens or not, and you want to work with them to accomplish a goal,
Correct.
okay? And it.
And what we have to
should
be
never-
careful of
if
with
you
that.
can avoid it, it should never be an oppositional situation,
Okay, so do you have enough input on that, Dawn?
Dude, what I'd like to do is for the next meeting that you have an application, could we just go through the tool, so when you start your deliberation, if we could just go through and have everyone indicate, not motion
like
by
you-
motion, like we did before.
Just like you trained us on application complete. We'll appreciate if you train us on
Yeah,
how to use this. So we do the proper thing relative to it and the proper steps. And
I hate to use this word spoon feed, but in my mind, you should have all the facts. Here's all the information. Here's what you're supposed to do. Then you are deliberating and you're making decisions, the gray areas, the things that need interpretation, the goal is that this is the framework, and then you guys actually have to confirm it and deliberate on things that aren't clear.
technically, if all that's done, and based on my recent experience, the presentation is minimal.
Mhm.
It's a, how do I want to say, it's a meet and greet, and this is what we're doing.
Depends on the project.
I understand. I'm using the residential. I'm sorry, but yes, you're absolutely right.
So like the application you were talking, you used yourself. Findings of facts. in the application, Was finding. If I was to go back and review this a year from now, I would have, reading this, I would still have no idea what the project.
And that's the point I was making before, where the documentation, the application, the checklist, all the things that you and I put together on that. And there were at least 3 iterations I know of, and the 25-foot came in the end of it, which really changed things. And that's when we went to taking it back to the original footprint, not even bothering with trying to get approval for what was there. The application changed to being, take it back to the original footprint.
The findings of fact. Change that.
Aaron, you want another question? This
I
Dawn.
was asking Don, how would the findings of fact change the fact that 25-foot came in?
Wouldn't,
No.
I'm just saying that nowhere in the findings of fact does it describe what the application is actually.
It doesn't, there's no narrative about
Not in the findings of fact or the conclusions that I can see.
okay,
It doesn't say,
What was the application for? Is that what you're asking?
it doesn't describe the application.
so there's,
It just references that conditions will or will not.
so
Impact,
there's no existing use, proposed use.
no description of it.
Not in the findings of fact per se, but if you go prior to that, when you're giving the project description, here's what the applicant.
Oh,
That wouldn't be part of the findings of fact in the legal record, right?
I'll have to look at how I'm terming that, because the idea is that the whole thing,
So like,
It's
I would
part of the-
think the findings of fact would have what the existing conditions are, square footages, impervious area, and then what all the changes are going to be
See, all that was in the application,
in the application, but
but not on the,
identify the application 20 years down the road is not findable, and we want the findings of fact to be.
Looks like we're gonna put a lot of emphasis on this findings of fact. legal standpoint or whatever.
Well, it's how you draw your
Accepting and
conclusion.
agreeing with the findings of fact doesn't really mean that we should be approving it.
And I guess my perspective on it, to your point, is that you have to have the application in hand. It says specifically what's being asked for. And with that, all the attachments, which was the plot plan, the layout, septic and tree weren't part of it, but on the plot plan, it did talk about the tree removal. It did talk about the septic tank.
Right, the information was there, but it's not referenced specifically.
Absolutely. And that was my point I was trying to make earlier, is that all said and done, you got to really, if you went back 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now and want to verify what was approved, the documents you'd have to look at to try to figure that out would be that application with all the attachments and these minutes.
Correct. And Aaron is right that, so the plan references should be in there. So if there's no reference to the plans, then that's, then the draft findings were not adequate. So when you go through them, when you receive them, if like that's the whole, if there's information missing or needs to be added, because it should be the facts about the property, existing conditions, what they're proposing, and then there should be references, like when there's studies and reports, site plans, surveys, like that should factually be stated in there that that's part of the application. So if it's not, it would need to be corrected. Because,
What's your point?
correct, you
We
would,
could amend
yes, absolutely.
information and then adopt with the amendments.
Yeah,
Right.
there's no assumption that the draft is what you'll adopt.
So I think what the point Aaron's making, I think others are making, is that what's that record show for reference for what we approved? That's the bottom line. From a legal standpoint, you can have all those facts, but if you don't have closure on what was asked for and what was approved, then we got a gap, pretty big gap. That's the point you're making.
So when you're reviewing them, that's the kind of thing you, if you could call out, if it's not been addressed, that I can work in future applications, and in the moment, it would need to be clarified for that particular application to actually be a useful tool.
Not because I did it, but I would have to say in my short tenure on the board, that was probably the most detailed application, backup documents that I've ever seen. I'm not saying that because I created it. I'm just saying, it's huge. I mean, having done it, and working with Don on it, it was very detailed. And we don't typically get that, I don't think.
We don't.
And what you had in front of you to make your decision on was that packet with the application. I think you had all that going in to make your decision, along with the checklist and so on. So we're beating a dead horse here, but I think,
I mean, that was a pretty simple project right there.
yeah,
So somebody that wants to come and do an addition on their house and all that, are we going to expect them to do that? They're going to have to go hire an engineer.
No, that's not where you all wanted to go with it. Like, I met with someone
know.
today and I was very clear, you do not have to have a survey, but you have to provide this information. And, basically kind of go back to the crux of it. The board needs to be able to make a decision and know how this meets or doesn't meet the requirements of the ordinance, and that it doesn't necessarily need to be a survey, but you have to provide, the burden of proof is on them. And I always say there's a fine line between clever and stupid, because you want enough information to make a decision, but you don't want to overly burden any applicant. So there's that dance, right?
Let's go back to the 25-foot thing. We wouldn't have caught it if somebody hadn't thought of it. It's not in the finding of facts. I don't think we ask them to do that. They just say they meet all the setbacks. We still got to do a lot of work. You got to have the drawing, you got to check it, and
Oh, yeah, it is.
just having findings of fact aren't going to give us the information.
and the other fly in the ointment, you and I have talked about, but the other fly in the ointment is the permit lists the setbacks. 25 isn't there. 100-foot's there. And there's nothing on that project that meets the 100-foot setback. So I asked Mark, is this boilerplate? He said, yes, it's boilerplate. So the permit hanging on the window out there right now doesn't talk about the 25-foot.
approved and this is.
So this is,
Well, one advantage to go into the zoning board with something like that is, if they are told they have to take it off, or maybe they're gonna get some slack and they can leave part of it on. Who knows what the decision will be? But I think legally, our decisions have to be put in the deeds.
In the deeds.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
So,
my advice to these folks are going to be exactly that.
What
Go-
what I'm saying is you sound a little bit like maybe there was not a lot of information on that when it got processed through your application. So if you had tossed that over to the ZBA, you could have not even thought about it and just let the ZBA deal with it. And it would have been guaranteed to go in the deeds. You wouldn't need to explain it or,
Well, the irony of that, Andy, in my own experience, going to the registry of deeds, that's only certain pieces of paper they'll accept. And it's very limited. And I was amazed. I think we
I mean, the
accomplished.
zoning board,
Pardon?
I mean, the zoning board.
straight.
Registry of deed, isn't that the point you're making? I thought you were talking about the registry of deed. That's the
It was.
final place to document
Right.
what was, yeah, and I agree with you. But they're very limited on what they'll take, and they have to be notarized, and I had to borrow, on my project, I had to borrow the application from Dawn, which she had to trust me to bring it back. That's how strict it is. And rightfully so. I mean, it needs to be notarized and all that, so, but, have we beat this to death, or?
Just want to say one more thing, because some questions have been raised, is that I'm going to work with the applicant, and try to get you the facts that you need to make a decision. But as part of what you're doing, if it's not adequate, then that's part of the job, is that you will then say, well, this isn't clear, we need to add this or change the state, whatever that looks like. Because you want it to be,
Have a checklist that says it's got to be 25 foot back and all that.
well,
Part of your duties, setbacks. That's where Mark comes in, when he looks at an application and he's supposed to say, in this zone, right? Now Mark's gonna listen to this tape and get mad at me. Sorry, Mark. He's supposed to say, you don't meet the setbacks here, you need to go to the ZBA. Now, there's always some debate whether you go to ZBA first. That's the first, goalpost right there. Okay, codes decides, what the use is, whether the use is non-conforming or not, whether it complies with the setbacks. ZBA was always clear when it comes to like surveys. We may have talked about this before. You can make a drawing, make a handwritten drawing for all we cared, okay? But if it's wrong, it's on you, okay? If you end up, you say the property line is in place A, and your neighbor complains, and you end up with a survey that says it's in place B, you could very well end up having to take part of your addition. So, it's definitely the responsibility of the applicant, to know where those property lines are.
Funny you mention that. We had that issue.
Yeah.
It's been resolved, but we had that issue. Okay, so, yeah,
Had a Miss Main sitting in front of us, all dressed up. She was privileged. Oh, I'm on the tape on it.
moving right along.
I'm going to provide draft findings for applications, and then you guys will discuss it at your meeting. And the idea is ultimately we'll adopt the findings, whether the finding is it doesn't meet, the conclusion is it doesn't meet the requirements, it's denied, or it's approved as presented or with conditions. And it may be changed so much, or it may just be what it is. And as we continue doing it together, we'll get more in sync on what you're looking for. But that, I think, should be attached to the minutes as well.
And I guess all I would ask, my input would be is keep it straightforward, simple, and usable.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to do my best.
I think about the process you and I worked on for this particular project, and that worked quite well till we stumbled onto the 25-foot setback, and that changed everything. But we stayed on course, we got it corrected, and we helped the owner get approval in a timely manner. So it works. Physically, it works. It's just a matter of the documentation.
always adapt when people have suggestions.
And then you need to steer us, once we accept that, you need to steer us, train us on how to use that as we approve an actual project.
You're comfortable with it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing is.
Just like we did with
Comfortable.
application complete. Any other input?
I personally, well, I understand how much of a workload this board has, and I understand why there's an effort to make it easier and more legal for the board. But in the process of doing that, I think we need to be careful not to make it more difficult and more complicated. The average property owner should be able to fill out one of these things without having to hire a lawyer or an engineer. Okay, and the board should expect to be, oh, I'm gonna bury myself, a little bit tolerant of the small mistakes. I mean, the ZBA always made some small decisions on the fly. You know, when there was something missing, can you fill it in here and now? Always be reminded that if you're wrong, you know, and you could be in trouble down the line. So, you know, I see these boards as a team with the applicants and the board. Said that before, you know, we need to be known as a community that's friendly to live in, friendly to run a business in, friendly to improve business in, you know, without, you know, like, when they get here, come here once or twice or three times and you should be pretty well done. You know, my thoughts.
There are some exceptions to that rule, but yes, in general, you're right. Yeah. Okay, hearing no more, you got what you have, what you need. Next.
I do. I just want to make a comment that there was I put on in front of you all, there's a notice. Their Conservation Commission is hosting a forum on trails. There's some funding opportunity coming up, and in previous comprehensive plans, the bike and ped plan, there's been a call to look at connecting the Garrett trails up behind the high school with Pisgah. And there's been a lot of work done behind.
We've been trying to do that for 20 years.
Right? Your name's on there, Andy. So I put a copy for you and I was going to ask you if you could bring it to the Rotary.
Bring it to Lions.
Oh.
Hold it up. Bad.
So if you don't want to keep that copy, you don't have to. If you know someplace that you could put it up, we'd appreciate that. But I hope that you will come to the.
So for background, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, the discussions were about, well, we didn't have the trail down by the high school at that point, but the discussions were about connecting the high school grounds with the Pisgah area, okay? And then there were further discussions about all of the adjoining towns. In other words, don't make a trail to nowhere. You know, talk to Manchester. And so when you develop a trail, it's going to meet up a trail with a trail in Manchester. You know, run up by the quarries or something. You know, and then there should be a way to connect over to the rail trail. So all this stuff can be interconnected. That was sort of a more global approach to just, you know. And then there's my favorite one is the trail along Mill Stream between downtown and the lake. That's something that, you know, it would be really attractive for the townspeople. You know, you'd be connecting the beach and Norcross Point and whatever festivities go on down there directly from downtown. Okay, but that's going to take every time a property turns over or it sells, somebody, probably Dawn, you know, they got to jump in and say to the buyer, you know, will you agree to this deed restriction? You know, what's it going to take to get you, you know, and just try to just build that trail down through. We don't need a big fancy thing. It's just it can be open until sunset or something like that, so we don't have to light it. It's a way to walk down through there, just 5 foot wide gravel path.
Anything else, Don?
Don't have anything else officially for the agenda. I have a couple of things I'd just like to ask you afterwards, but unless anyone has anything for me, I'm okay.
Good, done. Thank you.
Thing.
You're all set, right?
I'm all set. When the town council gave all of us a job to represent, like liaison to the planning board. Roy is with the zoning board, et cetera. They never really described what we were supposed to do, gave us a job description. So my feeling is to leave that up to you. I'm perfectly welcome to hear I'm overstepping or I'm talking too much. I'm gonna get a lot of quarters there. That's how they shut me up. Like old Judy Stubbins, God rest her soul. At the Rotary meetings, she talked too much, we did. But, you know, and you define my role. You have a message for the council or something, you know, I'll
Well, I think, Andy, we got one coming up. We aren't there yet, but if you heard us talking about these items A through E, which we're going to do more work the next meeting, that's a key one right there that once you understand what we want to do, you can grease the skids for us so that we can go in and have a, a efficient discussion, and approval if appropriate, and move on. That would be a big help.
That's great. My concern is I don't want to, there was a time, oh geez, probably here again, I use it 30-year timeframe, but town council kind of tried to instruct the planning board on what they should do and how they should decide. I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember that? The whole planning board threatened to quit en masse.
I think I was on the appeals board at the time, but yeah,
What?
I was on the appeals board at the time.
Remember,
Ed, not Ed, not Ed. Ed, no.
one that owned the insurance agency downtown.
Oh, Thomas.
No.
No, before that, I guess I don't know then.
When I remember, I'll tell you, but you must have served him as well because he was there the first year.
I'm not that far back.
But anyway, I just want to be a help, not a hindrance. And if I get off track, I have a sense.
My keywords are moving right along, right?
Yes, sir, you-
Notice that.
sir.
Okay, relative to the work I was doing for that project that I recused myself from, I hope you understand, I've taken 2 of those in the last 3 years in the interest of helping friends. Now, probably won't do it again. I don't know. But that said, I have learned so much, and the discussion we had tonight was able to reflect on real time what it is an applicant sees coming in. To me, it's invaluable, and I hope you see it that way. And I've learned a lot from it. And Dawn she's the interface with the applicants, helping them fill all the blanks in and anticipate what the board's going to ask for. And with my experience from dealing with the board over a short period of time, I try to check all those boxes off in that application. So I appreciate your tolerance. I appreciate your putting up with my position on that. And again, it was an effort to learn and help the process. So thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I have a second. I have a second. All in favor? The vote. Thank you.
It's a hard job to keep my hand down.
To your point though, Rick, I think it's invaluable to be on the other